What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All NBA show presented by FanDuel. You guys get started on FanDuel with 150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/AllNBA. I'm your host, Adam Mares, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague and the birthday boy, Tim Legler. Legs, I hope you had a great Christmas. You certainly caught a good game. How are you doing?
I had a great Christmas. Yeah, it was a little bit more hectic traveling with family with a 3-year-old. That made it a little bit more hectic as far as my travel and game prep. But we did get a great game. It was a great day overall, league-wide, Christmas Day. We're going to talk about that. And enjoyed it, man. I spent my birthday basically the next day in Boston most of the day, kind of hanging out, doing some family stuff. So it was good. Got back late last night, and I'm ready to go. A year older than the last time we talked, but that's okay.
You look rejuvenated, man. You looked refreshed. And as you mentioned, man, you caught a really good game that we're going to break down in detail today. And that is, of course, the Boston Celtics and the 76ers. Later on in the show, Marc Stein's going to join us and talk about Luka Doncic, because his departure with that right calf strain that he's just been dealing with for 2 years now, you know, that's a big story now for the Dallas Mavericks and for the Western Conference at large. So we're going to get into that as well as some other news and notes from around the league as well with our buddy Marc Stein. But we're going to start with the game you called. It's always nice when you get a front row seat to a marquee matchup like this. The Boston Celtics hosting the 76ers. This was a big test, and the 76ers passed and got their signature win, thanks in large part to 33 points and 12 assists from Tyrese Maxey. He was incredible. I didn't know this. 12 assists is the second most he's ever had in his career. 14 is the most. That also came earlier this month in December in a game featuring the big three, you know, one of the 6 games where Embiid, Maxey, and Paul George have been on the court. So that means something to me that Maxey in this game scored, but also facilitated and got a bunch of people open in their 118-114 win over the Celtics. That's what stood out to me, but I'm curious what stood out to you.
No, that definitely did. And, you know, first of all, the 12 assists, you're right. It's not his calling card. He's not a big time playmaker. I mean, that's not his thing. He's a scorer. And he's a guy that can facilitate some offense. It's just that's not his strength. It's never really had to be since he's been in Philadelphia. There's always been somebody else that was there as the primary guy, and including their center, Joel Embiid, who a lot of the offense goes through. So it's a different role for a point guard in that uniform alongside the guys that Tyrese Maxey's played with. But 12 assists, it spoke to the level of importance they started to show him as the game wore on. That's really what led to that, because he had 12 points in the first quarter. He was clearly the best player on the floor in the first quarter. So right out of the gate, he came out very aggressive, was using his speed to get to the rim. He hit a couple deep shots, and that set up really the rest of his night. I thought, even at Tatum at 32 and 15, I thought Tyrese Maxey was the best player on the court. There wasn't really anything Boston was ever able to get to slow him down. And that was really impressive to me. Look, you obviously get Joel Embiid, Paul George out there with him. Amazingly, only the third game that they have started and finished together.
And finished, yeah. I was going to say, I thought it was 6 starts, but you're right.
Yeah, yep. And it's not just, the other night Embiid got ejected, so that's one game where they don't get to finish. But he also, remember the game Paul George got hurt during the game and left. So I don't know, they've started like 8 or 9, but they've only finished 3 games all year. When I mean finished, that doesn't mean necessarily on the court. It just means they were available, like they were in the game. No one had been thrown out. Everybody was suited up and nobody got hurt when the game ended. Like, that's what we're talking about here. That's the level to which they've been decimated this year by injuries and just not having availability or continuity, but they're starting to get that now. And you saw a sample of what that could be on Christmas Day.
Yeah. And that's what was so impressive. And I'm going to give you a couple things. Well, first of all, Tyrese Maxey, and I did not remember this until it became a story after the game. He had a stinker on Christmas last year, just 12
Yeah.
points. I think he was 4 of 20 shooting. And after the game, he said, that's been in the back of my mind all year, how bad I was on that Christmas game. And so he was really looking forward to this opportunity and I think was extra focused. But the two things that stood out to me, and I'll start with this first one. I think there's some things, the game is evolving. Teams are, and the Celtics are sort of ground zero for that evolution. They're playing the style of basketball that, we really haven't seen to the degree that they play. And one of the things that is so important is the ability to handle full court pressure. They have a lot of guys that can guard. They love to put pressure on you full court, wear you down. They weren't able to do that to Tyrese Maxey. The 76ers only had 5 turnovers heading into crunch time, into the final 5 minutes. They got a bunch at the end of the game. We'll talk about that. But they handled their on-ball pressure full court, and they handled it in the half court. And that's one of their strengths, their ability to have 5 defenders. And the 76ers just weren't bothered by that, in large part because of Maxey. And then when you extend that pressure, few players in the NBA are better at blowing by that pressure. And I just thought that game, more than anything else, was that's if you overcome that strength of Boston's, then you really cripple them. And I thought Maxey alone, primarily did that to them.
He's a very difficult guy to take space away from because of how quickly he accelerates. Now, I will tell you this. You are right, with the exception of that short spurt when the Celtics got back into the game in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
They got to him, and it was the only time in the game they did, but it was back-to-back possessions. One, I think it was Derek White was up in him, and he forced a backcourt violation. It was like right down the line where we were sitting, and you could see it. And I signaled it even before the official did, because he crossed in, but Derek White did a great job of cutting off his like side to side movement with the ball, and he ended up trying to escape that, and he went into the backcourt. And then the very next possession, he got picked up full right 3/4 court by Jaylen Brown, who is very long, physical. And I thought the game was incredibly physical off the dribble on the perimeter anyway. More than I've seen all year, particularly as Tatum was being officiated. I thought they really let the Sixers get into him with his handle. But in this particular possession, it was Jaylen Brown into Maxey, forced him really to fall down, picked his pocket, threw it ahead to Al Horford for the dunk. And then I think maybe that was either before or after Derek White hit the 3 to cut it to 3. And I said to myself at the time, in my head, I'm thinking like, man, Boston, after all this, Boston's going to probably end up winning this game, because they had all the momentum. The place went crazy when they were making that run in the fourth quarter. So that was the only time they did get to him. But you're right. For the most part, he's a very difficult guy to corner. He's very elusive. I mean, there was times even they looked like they had a great trap extended on a ball screen, like 35, 40 feet out, and he either turned the corner on the big or he split the big the one time and went in and dunked the ball with his left hand. He is just, there's quick in this league, and then there's guys like Tyrese Maxey who are just on a different level altogether with their acceleration and their burst, and it was a problem for Boston all day, really, to try to affect him.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the physicality, because this is one of the things that makes him different from a Ja Morant or a De'Aaron Fox. And those guys obviously have other counters to it, but he's strong. He has such a strong lower body that it's the combination of Drew Holiday's a strong defender. He could put an arm on you, could do different things. He's big enough to absorb those things, and he's quick enough to get around you. And I thought so if we flip that, so he did that good job on that on the offensive end and presented a challenge that makes you sit and go, okay, that's a challenge now for this Boston perimeter point of attack defense. But on the other end, you have to be able to do the opposite. You have to be able to guard. And I thought he did a good job, and really the 76ers as a whole did a good job with their point of attack defense. So that's the Celtics' biggest strength. I know we all talk about their shooting, which is obviously there, but they have defenders at 5 spots on the perimeter, and they can get around you 5 spots on the perimeter. And Maxey single-handedly did both ends of that, won that matchup on both sides. So his defense stood out to me as well.
Well, think about this. They had 2 turnovers going into the fourth quarter. 2. And the Boston Celtics eventually came up with 3 steals in the fourth quarter. They, at one point,
all in the last 5 minutes.
My partner, Dave Pash, on the call, and it might have been right before that began, halfway through the fourth quarter, he said, I don't remember what year, but he was like going to be the first time the Boston Celtics were not going to record a steal in a game since forever, probably the Cousy days. It was like this incredible number of games. And then, of course, they end up with 3, and they did cash those in. So even though they only forced 6, they had just as many points off of Philadelphia's 6 turnovers as Philly had off of their 13 or whatever it was. So they did cash those in the fourth, which made it an interesting game. But look, I just felt like Philly, I thought that their intensity defensively more than anything else in that game stood out to me. They were really getting after it. And I'm talking about guys like Kelly Oubre,
Yep.
and Caleb Martin. Like those guys were so good defensively. Like Tyrese Maxey's not known to be a great defender. As quick as he is, he's not as physical on that end of the floor as you need to be a great defender. Caleb Martin, Oubre, absolutely in this game. We know what Paul George can do defensively. I thought he was great, even though, again, he struggled offensively to get going. Embiid is always a factor in a presence defensively. I thought Yabusele gave them great minutes off the bench. You know, Kyle Lowry played tough defense. Of course, usually in there throwing his body around, trying to take charges. So I just thought, to me, the biggest takeaway of all, outside of Maxey being like that good in that setting, was how competitive Philly's defense was, how hard they played, how much it bothered Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, particularly Jaylen Brown in the first half, shut out in the first half. Tatum wasn't great in the first half. Both of those guys pretty big in the second half, but Philly's defense, to me, carried the day. Boston got their normal 49 threes up, and they made 20 of them. They usually make 23s in a game. They're smoking you. And it didn't happen. Didn't happen in this game for Philadelphia, who took 40 of their own. And we'll get into that as to why, with Caleb Martin in a minute, because that was kind of a crazy out-of-body experience that he had shooting the basketball. But, yeah, man, impressive. And it gives you a taste of what this team is now, if they stay on the court together, what this team is going to be as we head over the last 2/3 of the season.
Well, I love you brought up the defense, because I think Paul George, Caleb Martin, and Kelly Oubre, that's as good of a 2-3-4 defensively, at least on the perimeter, as really any team in the league. I mean, there's going to be some people that argue there are, the Boston Celtics, the Oklahoma City Thunder. There are teams that have some really good defenders, but those 3 guys, as we saw in that game, they can match up with the Boston Celtics as well as anybody. Nobody's going to be able to shut them down. Celtics still got 114 points. As you mentioned, they still got their 3-pointers out, hit 20 of them. They're going to score on you. You're not shutting them down. It's, can you slow things down just enough? And those guys, to me, that felt like a repeatable defensive effort. That looked like playoff level effort, and those guys are really good at it. The thing you don't count on is, can those guys provide some offense? And Kelly Oubre, just 4 points. The answer was no. Paul George, 12 points, 0 of 7 from 3. The answer was no there. But Caleb Martin filled in the gaps. And I love Caleb Martin. We've talked about him as a guy when they signed him. I was very high on him. Hasn't shot the ball incredibly well, but 7 of 9 in this game. And again, when I see his role is supposed to be the 4th or 5th option, when you move him up, I don't think he's going to be very consistent. But when he's the 5th guy, because you have all those other guys out there, I think these 7 of 9 nights are not going to be that crazy, because that's his role, and he's going to get open looks, which is what happened in this game, and he made almost all of them.
Listen, you rarely see a game in which a guy is predetermined to be left alone as much as he was. And that was Boston's clear strategy. They were not going to rotate to Caleb Martin. And, we talked before the game with Joe Mazzulla in terms of defending Embiid and what they were going to have to do. And he, his biggest thing that he had on his list was, we have to defend them without fouling, because when you foul and Embiid gets the line a ton and all that, it just lets them dictate pace. And it lets them dictate control of the game. So when that happens, it allows their defense to set up. Boston's not playing as fast up the floor and getting into their transition threes. So that was their priority. And they were going to try to take the ball out of his hands so they wouldn't have to play him one-on-one in the post against smaller guys and foul him. And they did double him some. He didn't play in the post a ton. He was more like mid-ISO and then perimeter a lot for Embiid. So Boston was never sucked into constantly having to worry about him backing down Horford or backing down, a smaller guy that he'd be playing against. They decided, when they blitzed Maxey on ball screen, they did whatever they were going to do with Paul George or Embiid. They were not going to rotate to Caleb Martin. And what's interesting is, I see teams come up with a strategy like that periodically in the league, but just a certain guy. We know what, we're going to leave him. If he can make some, go ahead. But typically, when that guy starts making them, there's an adjustment. Boston never did. They literally were just saying out loud practically, well, I bet you can't make another one.
Right. Yep.
And because he has really struggled. I mean, he's 30% on the year, and that's up. That's up from where it was like the first 15 games when he could
Right.
not make a shot to save his life. And I think Nick Nurse even alluded to the fact that maybe he was starting to get into his ears, between his ears a little bit. He's brought it up, but nothing like this. I mean, it's a high for him, first of all. And just the fact that he had that much time. And to his credit, man, like he took his time. He took it, he towed it up, he kind of got himself on balance, he thought about it, and then he went up and shot it. And every one of them was clean except for one. He banked in like late clock. That helped on it was his day. That told us that. But to me, I'm watching him and I'm saying whoever's in that spot, whether that's him or that's Oubre or that's Kyle Lowry, like when he's getting minutes, and anybody else, Eric Gordon when he comes back, who was hurt yesterday. If those guys can just make their share of that shot, because they're going to get that look because of all the attention that those other three guys command. If they can just be average to above average from the three, Philadelphia is going to be a problem for teams. And it happened in this game. And look, if he doesn't shoot the ball the way he did, and conversely, if Peyton Pritchard doesn't have a nightmare shooting game, because he's been such a big part of their runs this year, and he goes 1 for 9, 0 for 8 from the three, like those two things happening on the same day, and Philly wins by 4. So, I mean, that's a good sign for Philly. They can win it. They can, they won that game, but like, he's not going to be that good most nights, but you don't have to be. Just give me some 4 for 10 nights. Give me some 3 for 7 nights. That's good enough. If you also get a couple of those out of Yabusele and you get some of those out of Kelly Oubre, it's going to be enough to supplement what the stars do. And Caleb Martin was, outside of Maxey, Caleb Martin was probably the biggest story in the game, because he hasn't done that all year. He's done that in his entire career. And he did it on Christmas Day in a really high profile spot.
Well, he does it against the Celtics. We remember the playoff series a couple years back when he was with Miami. Here's the thing. He's not a shooter, but he's not there's levels of non-shooter. And I don't think he's Matisse Thybulle. You're right. Boston treated him like he's Thybulle. Like, if they're going to give him 9 threes, we'll take it. I still think he's a guy that you have to treat. This guy was a scorer in college, and he was a scorer on, long twos, not necessarily a ton of threes, but mid-range jump shooting. He could score those at Nevada. So he's a guy that I think should not be treated like a complete non-shooter. And if you do that, and your plan in a playoff series is, well, we're just going to force the ball to him. I think that he can have nights like this. I just think he's a good player, and then he brings a lot on the other end. The other thing that stands out to me, though, is they won the bench minutes, they being the 76ers. And we talk about Boston and how they've developed this deep bench. Obviously, Peyton Pritchard going 1 of 9, 0 of 8 from 3 is a big part of that. But the Celtics don't lose those minutes the way they did very often. And that's such an important thing for Philadelphia in particular, that they were able to mix their bench in with their starters and have really effective. In fact, they won their minutes more than the starters did, have really effective stints. That to me stood out.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And a lot of it had to do with Pritchard. And look, Drew Holiday didn't play, which would have forced another bench component into the game, probably an Al Horford, who ends up starting. He went with a bigger lineup at the start of the game because Drew Holiday didn't play. You're right about that. And for Philadelphia, that's going to be important for them as well, man. They're going to have to get that. I was impressed. The other Philly game I called this year, they played the Lakers early in the year, and they only had like Paul George. They had Jared McCain, who played really well in that game. Of course, he's out for the year, so that's a big loss for them. But I haven't seen them in person since. And I was really impressed. I was really impressed by how determined they were to be physical defensively and be committed to that end. And their energy was just phenomenal. And they had a lot of confidence. They played with it, and they got off to a good start. That's a big part of the reason. And Maxey kind of helped them get going. Now, the one final component to this, and I asked Nick Nurse before the game, Paul George, I said, if you never saw Paul George play and you just looked at his stats, you would look at it and go, interesting. He's way below his career norm. 16 points a game, 41% from the field. And and it's not like a terribly small sample size. He's been out a little bit, but he's 17 games is enough. And I'm like, what's going on? And he just basically said he thinks he's still having an adjustment. He hasn't had a lot of time playing with Embiid at all. And that's a big part of what they brought him in to do. They said that their 2-man action was, when they signed him, they expected to be their second most prevalent usage outside of Embiid, like ISO areas. and they haven't barely run it. He goes, we literally have no data on Paul George, Joel Embiid pick and roll. We don't even know.
Right.
He goes, because
Yeah.
they haven't run it together. So he said, I think obviously playing with Embiid makes you better. And Paul George, he's still getting comfortable. And he goes, he's be honest with you, he said, if you went and looked at all of his missed shots this year, you'd be like, well, he should be shooting over 50% from the field because he's had good looks. So he's not worried about it. Nick Nurse didn't seem worried about it in the least. Now, Paul George would have loved to come out and maybe made this his breakout game, give me a 30-point Christmas Day game. He didn't do it. He struggled offensively. He still was a factor in the game with his defense, his ball handling, and his playmaking. So he still factored in, but he hasn't even gotten going remotely. And you feel like it's a matter of time, unless this guy all of a sudden hits some level in his career where this is how good as it's going to get now the rest of the way. I find that hard to believe. He's not that banged up, and he's not 36 years old. Like, he's still in his prime. So I think that is going to open up for him the more he plays with Embiid. And that's what it's all about, right? Having three of those guys. So on a given night, one of them can have an off game. And as they did on Christmas, and Maxey and Embiid were really good, they win the game. You don't need all three guys. You just need 2 out of 3 on a given night. And some nights that's going to mean they have to have Paul George because maybe Maxey struggles. But they haven't gotten there yet with him, and it didn't happen on Christmas. And I was really wondering if that was going to be a game that he was going to be able to break out a little bit, but he's still missing shots that he normally makes.
Well, I think what you're pointing to here, and we can kind of step back now and look big picture, this was a signature win for the 76ers. To me, it's the signature win going into Boston on Christmas and getting this win. So that's a signature win. They're 7-3. They've won 2 in a row. They're 7-3 in their last 10. And now they sit 4.5 games behind the 5 seed. And that 5 seed to me is the mark. I just think you want to avoid, playing one of the top 3 teams. Because if you have to go, there's 3 really good teams in the East right now. The Knicks, the Celtics, and you got the Cavs. If you avoid one of those in the first round, it gets tough for everybody after that. So that's the number. And 4.5 is not that much. They're playing good basketball. And to me, what this game represents was proof of concept. This was a proof of concept game for the 76ers. They can be in that tier with the other teams that they're trying to contend with out East. But now the question is 4.5 games back. That's not a lot, but can they stay healthy for an extended? So I feel like I am buying the Sixers blueprint. I just am still skeptical of their ability to stay healthy long enough to build the continuity they're going to need.
Well, I think, and look, you'd be suspending reality if you were to buy into them being healthy, for an extended stretch with Embiid, especially and I'm sure people, maybe some people saw the game, they didn't see the game. I don't know, maybe this wasn't something they picked up on in the recap of the game if they just read about it. Did you see the play with Embiid before the game when he hurt himself?
I mean, come on, man.
It happened right where we're sitting. We're right there. He's warming up.
You watched
shooting threes. Yeah, he's shooting threes, and he just steps back, and his foot steps on the foot of a security guard who's standing off the court with his back to the court. The guy's just standing there and looking up into the crowd like security guards do in that situation. And Embiid steps on his foot, rolls his ankle, trips over. It was weird. They had these ropes set up around the court, which I'd never seen in an NBA arena. But he trips over the rope and falls back, and he's basically laying in the first row of the crowd. The arena's basically empty. It's way before the game, but he was down for a good amount of time. Yeah. And he's holding his leg, and Andre Drummond runs over, and the coaches run over, and gets up, kind of makes his way to the locker room, and literally I'm sitting there with Passion. We're like, is he out now? Are you kidding me? Did I just really see that? And so he's on the ground a lot, is my point. Yeah. And this was a warm-up play, and he still ended up on the ground with no defense on him. So for you to sit there and say, or me to say, oh, I expect Joel Embiid now, he's going to be healthy the rest of the year. Come on. You got to show me more than that. Because I'm telling you right now, Adam, if Joel Embiid played every game from here until April 1st, I'd still be like, okay, when's it going to happen?
Yeah.
Something's going to happen leading up to the playoffs. So look, he's just one of those guys that's dealt with 3 facial fractures. My goodness. He's one of those guys that's so many things have happened to. It's I'll never really buy into it. It's just going to be, hey, fingers crossed. I want the guy to be healthy. I want him to play. I'm taking this game by game with Joel Embiid. But you're 100% right. Look, if they do stay healthy, they have as good a top-tier offensive talent on the roster as anybody in this league. Yeah. So And when they play that hard defensively and they get contributions out of their shooters, yeah, absolutely, man. Philadelphia's in the mix with those top teams in the East. They just got to dig their way out of this hole a little bit more. They were 2-12, 2-12 to start the year, and they're gradually climbing. You said 7 out of 10. It's actually 8 out of 11, which is even better. So they're inching their way up, man. And that was a massive, massive moment for them and a confidence builder for them going forward, winning that game in Boston.
And if we go to the other side, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about, all right, the Celtics are now on the doorstep of the Cavs. The Cavs have had this miracle start to the season, been playing as perfect as they could have hoped for. And the Celtics were still on their heels. They've lost 2 in a row now, 6 of their last 4, which they only have 8 losses, so now they are 4 games behind Cleveland and only 2 up on the Knicks. They're closer to falling into third now than they are to second. It is still early, but I do look at this and I go, Boston, this is their worst stretch of the entire season. They've lost to some good teams, but it is at least noteworthy that this is the first, it's hard to say a slump, but it's a mini slump that they're in right now. So any notes on Boston?
No, they are, man. I mean, look at the games they lost. I mean, I referenced the game they lost to Chicago when they took 56 threes and made 14 in a game. And, they answered that by going to Chicago and blasting them the very next game, which is a good response. I think they lose to Orlando. They lose this game. This is a good team. I mean, but they had some uneven play in this game. They were flat. It was weird because they were kind of flat early. Then they fight all the way back, and it's tied up going into the fourth quarter. And as an analyst, I'm sitting there going, man, Pash and I are like, oh, this is going to be great, man. We're going down to the wire. It's tie game going into the fourth. And then like 6 minutes in, Philly's up 15 in the fourth quarter. And you're like, wow. And then, of course, Boston makes their run and end up being really exciting to finish. But they had some flat stretches in this game. Now, we have to go full disclosure and context on them. Drew Holiday doesn't play. That was a last-minute decision. He didn't play. But, I said this stuff about Embiid and like the fluky stuff and the weird stuff. Well, how about Porzingis? I mean, Kristaps Porzingis has played 10 games all year. He starts. He plays pretty well early, makes a couple of threes, 3 of them, in fact, in his 13 minutes. And just in an innocuous play. He's not even trying to go anywhere. He's just sort of dribbling the ball like he's maybe going to go run a dribble handoff or something. And he steps on Joel Embiid's foot, rolls his ankle, and he's done. 13 minutes. Yeah. He played through it in the second quarter, but he was kind of gimping. And then I knew once he sat down at halftime, like, you're not coming back if it's hurting you because it's going to stiffen up even more over the 15 minutes. And he didn't come out to the bench for the second half. And it's like, so there you go. Kristaps Porzingis again hurt. That guy can't catch a break because it's weird, fluky stuff that's happening to him. But so they don't have him. They only end up for 13 minutes. They don't have Holiday. All right, that matters. But I just felt overall the level of intensity, the level of clean efficiency was just higher on the part of Philadelphia. So you're right. This is Boston's worst stretch. And look, they're a defending champion, man. We know what they're capable of. And You're going to have lulls like this during the season. And they're in one right now. They're not playing their best basketball. They're not fully healthy. Super long year. Not too worried about Boston whatsoever.
Yeah. All right. Let's take our first break. On the other side, Marc Stein was going to call in. He's backed up about 15 minutes. So we'll push our late segment where we're actually going to talk about some of the other games that happened, including Mikal Bridges breaking out for the New York Knicks, who are playing as well as anyone in the NBA right now. We'll get to that game and some of the others from Christmas Day as well on the other side. First, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com/AllNBA to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And I'll tell you, the Celtics currently sit at -110 to win the Eastern Conference. Even though they're 4 games down from the Cavs currently, they still have basically even odds to win the Eastern Conference. The Knicks are #2 at +460. The Cavs, who are currently #1 to come out of the East, they're at +600. So if you like any of those bets, you can hop on the FanDuel app right now and place a future bet on them. That's FanDuel.com/AllNBA. Never waste a hunch and make every moment count with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older and present in Colorado. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. And if you have a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-522-4700. If you're looking for tickets to go to an NBA game here over this New Year's break, hop on the Game Time app. They've got killer last-minute deals, all in prices, view from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. So you're trying to buy 2 tickets, 4 tickets, 8 tickets, 20 tickets, whatever it is, you can hop on, and it has a very easy-to-use interface, so you can see exactly what your seat is going to look like. You can find out what pairs of tickets are together or groups of tickets are together. You could set alerts, so if a ticket you have your eye on lowers in prices, you can get that last minute deal. And they have my favorite feature, which is the all-in pricing. You go on all these apps and you think you know what your price. You're like, all right, I'm spending $200. You go to checkout. All of a sudden it's $350 because there was all these hidden fees. With Game Time, they have the all-in pricing feature right there on that home screen. You click on that, and as you search, that number is your checkout price number. It makes it incredibly easy for you to get last minute deals on whatever it is you're looking for. And if you're not trying to go in an NBA game or a sports game in general, they also have events going on in your area. Maybe you didn't even know about. You hop on there, you just see what's going on, and you might find out something you wanted to go to just from scrolling their events page. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code ALLNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and redeem the code. Really important for us. It helps us out every time you use this code. It helps us out. ALLNBA. You'll get $20 off. So download the Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, back here, segment 2. I'm with Tim Legler. Legs, let's talk about these other games here. I know you were traveling and stuff, so probably only were able to put one eye on it, but the game of the day of Christmas Day might have been the Spurs and the Knicks. Wembanyama goes for 42 points. I texted you at halftime of this game. We were talking about who's going to be the player of Christmas Day, who's going to stand out the most. It looked like Wemby was going to go for 50. He had an incredible first half. He had a good second half. It wasn't bad, but he wasn't able to keep up the pace. But the show was stolen by Mikal Bridges going for 41 points, including some clutch buckets down the stretch. And so here are the Knicks having won 5 in a row, 8 of their last 10, and they get that win, which you wouldn't think the Spurs, although Spurs have been playing great, but you wouldn't think that would be a good win. With how Wemby was playing in that one, that was a very good win for them. And the way they were able to pull it out was good. So what stood out to you?
Yeah, great win. And it's funny because you and I talked recently about, I was like, maybe Wemby one day is going to have a 50, 20, 10, and 10 block game. Right? I mean, I think it's going to happen. Yeah. And you think about it, like he was trending there, 42, 18, 4 assists, but 4 blocks. That's a massive, massive stat line. He was incredible. He gets the shooting the 3 well and in rhythm with his length. There's just virtually nothing you're going to do to stop that. You can't even take away enough space to do it. Like he's just going to comfortably go up and shoot that thing with normal shooting motion over anybody that's on him. And he got rolling. But to me, obviously the story of the game is Mikal Bridges. And he was being scrutinized pretty heavily when he first started playing with the Knicks this year. And, he was a guy that we all valued a lot in Phoenix as like that 3rd or 4th best guy, right? Because he defends and he was really good at the corner 3, and he started adding to his game by the time he left there, went to Brooklyn. And you're like, okay, if he's your top guy, that's kind of what Brooklyn was, what you expected him to be. But still, he was a really good offensive player. Now he goes back to New York, and you're like, okay, he's back in that role he was in Phoenix, sort of, right? Because you got Brunson, you got Towns, you got Anunoby, him, so he can kind of pick his spots a little bit. But he wasn't really a guy that was endearing himself necessarily with the fan base. They were like, we want more. We expect more. We thought Mikal Bridges was more, even though like his numbers were pretty solid. This is more like not 41, but like just more what they expected, like a more dynamic offensive player. He gave it to him, and he answered the bell in a huge way in the 4th quarter. And it's like, kind of think about it, it's kind of crazy. Brunson wasn't his best, 7 for 23. Karl-Anthony Towns had a pretty solid game. 21 and 9 for 16. That's pretty solid. So they had another guy step up outside of their top 2 stars and answer the call and basically end the game with the way that he played. And so now all of a sudden he goes from a guy that people are kind of like wondering, is there more? Are we going to get more from Mikal Bridges to like now the guy won't have to buy a dinner in New York the rest of the year?
You might get it. I mean, if you recall, the story was this summer, man, he really screwed up his shot. There was that ugly hitch in it, and he was ice cold to start. And anytime you make an adjustment to your shooting, if you go through a slump, people are going to say, what happened? You screwed up your own shot. That was the case for a while. It has not been the case most recently for him as he started to find his three-point shot. In fact, 6 of 9 in that game. He shot 50% in his previous 3 games on volume, basically 7.5 attempts over that stretch. So he's taking shots and he's making them. And that's the thing. Early on, when he wasn't making shots, we start to point out, well, he doesn't handle physicality well. Is he giving you this? Is he giving you that? When he makes shots, you're like, all right, phenomenal perimeter defender, especially against guards, and he shoots the 3 and can give you on any given night 41 points. That's the guy that you were hoping for when you got him. And now the Knicks, after the first 6 weeks of the season, does the trade help them? Now they're on a roll where you see the impact Cat has, the impact Mikal Bridges has, and you're like, you know what? It's starting to look like a team that belongs in that upper tier.
You look at how he's flipped the script with his 3-point shooting, but he wasn't like he was terrible in November, but he wasn't making threes. But you look at the month of November, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 20-point games in the month. He had a lot of nights where he shot well overall, but couldn't make a 3-point shot. He shot 29% for the month, shooting 6.5 a game. I mean, it's a lot of shots. And he just wasn't shooting well. And look at how he's flipped the script this month, 47%. His temps have gone up, and he's making at a much higher rate. So the impact from the 3-point line is dramatic over what it was earlier in the year. And that's what he's going to have to do, because he's going to get a lot of catch and shoot threes on a given night, because Brunson and Towns dominate a lot of the usage. And sometimes that ball is going to come out to you, and that's your one opportunity on that possession. If you don't shoot that shot and you try to put it down and can't get the shot off, you're not getting the ball back a lot of times, because you've gotten it the second half of the clock anyway. That's the way it works in this league when you're the third or fourth guy. So he's going to have to shoot that shot at a higher rate, and they expect him to shoot it when he gets space. And he's just gotten into an incredible rhythm. And most nights now, he's over 50 from the field. He's 40 to 50 from the 3-point line or beyond. He's found himself a great rhythm, man. He's averaging 23 points a game in the month of December. So an entire month's work, 23 points a game on 58% shooting. Needless to say, he has quieted the naysayers in New York that were wondering if there should have been more to him when they got him. They're getting the best version of Mikal Bridges right now, and it's as a result, you look at the Knicks and you go, man, yeah, this team legitimately is a threat to win the whole thing potentially, or to win the Eastern Conference. I'm not saying they would beat Boston. I'm not making any predictions. I'm just saying you can't look at them when Bridges is playing like this and think that that's a team that can't go toe-to-toe with Boston, because they absolutely can.
And that's exactly the way to put it. It's just it's also the improvement, week by week for them. They're getting better. So if they can continue that, they're really going to be scary. And as I mentioned, they're 2 games behind Boston right now. Let's see if that gets interesting here over the next month, what direction that breaks. The last guy, real quick hitter, Austin Reaves, 26, 10, and 10. You lose Anthony Davis right out of the gate. He plays in the first quarter, gets hurt, has to go down. Both of those teams desperately needed a win. They needed somebody to step up. Triple-double for Austin Reaves as they get the win. Almost lost it to the Warriors, but they get the win. Meanwhile, the Warriors are spiraling. Which one of those do you want to touch, the Warriors or Austin Reaves' good game?
Man, I think for me, it's probably a little bit more about the Warriors, just because of how great they looked early, man. And now this tailspin, they got out of the gate, like 10-3 to start the year. And you look up and their defensive rating was top 5 in the league. They were one of only 2 teams top 5 rated on both ends of the floor. Sounded, those numbers and metrics go back to their championship days. That's kind of what they were doing defensively. They were a top 5 defensive team in the league at that time. They had gotten back there. Now, here you go. You look up at Christmas. If you had told me, like December or basically Thanksgiving, if you told me we'd be sitting here at Christmas and the Warriors are basically a 500 team, I don't think I would have believed that. But here they are, man, and they're having a hard time. And even on a game when Curry's sensational, they still lose. So that's obviously a bad sign. Draymond, come back to earth a little bit offensively. He had been playing really, really good beginning of the year and just looked more aggressive, more confident, more impactful on that end. He's kind of come back to the earth a little bit. Their bench, Buddy Hield, again, a guy that was so splashy, man. The first 3 weeks of the season, he was one of the stories of the league, the way he played. 17 minutes, 2 for 6, 5 points. That's not That was like a quarter for him, 5 points beginning of the year. So a lot of things have sort of changed for the Warriors, man. And it's hard to put a finger on exactly why, but pretty disappointed he was sitting here one game over 500 as we head into the new year.
All right, let's now welcome in our NBA insider, Marc Stein, who joins the show, one of the busiest men in the NBA. Do we have him here, producer James, to bring on in? Let's see if he magically appears for us somehow, some way. There he is, the Stein Line. You guys can read him, the Stein Line Substack. You also can catch him up on the DLLS podcast. Mark, how are you doing today?
Gents, I'm good. Hope you guys had a good holiday.
We did indeed, man. And we were breaking down all of the games, but one of the games we did not touch on was the Dallas Mavericks falling to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And that's not even the story. The story is that Luka Doncic left the game with the right calf strain. And this one looked bad. Like, not looked bad as in anything he did. What looked bad is you can always read a player's reaction, you know, how frustrated they are in the moment. And that was as frustrated as you'll see Luka. He reaches for it, and it was one of those where he's like, not again. That's what it looked like to me. Not again. You've got to be kidding me, because he's been dealing with this one for a while. So what's the latest on him, and what went through your mind when you saw him reach down for his calf?
You read it well from faraway Denver, because it's the most serious injury he's dealt with as a Dallas Maverick. And I think he knew it instantly. You know, he had a similar calf strain that, you know, cost him a few playoff games in 2022. Remember, it happened in the last game of the regular season in San Antonio. At the start of last season, the Mavericks are in Madrid. It's Luka's homecoming trip to play at Real Madrid against the team where he learned how to be a pro. And he could only play a few minutes in that game because of a calf strain he sustained at a practice the day before that game. And believe me, Mavericks officials were nervously watching those few minutes because Luka was desperate to get out there and just do something for the crowd in Madrid, and just played a few minutes, and you know they had to nervously deal with that. And then this season, the day before media day, he takes an inadvertent kick from a teammate, ends up with a calf injury that costs him all of training camp. But one of Luka's trademarks is he always makes it back pretty fast. He plays through a lot of injuries. You saw him in the playoffs last season playing with all kinds of ailments and just not missing a game. But I think he knew instantly that this was a calf strain of a level to which he's never experienced. And he's going to be out for at least a month now. He's going to be reevaluated in a month. And so the Mavericks are about to enter January. January is a brutal month for every NBA team. Dallas has 3 games left in December, 16 in January. And the realistic scenario is they're not going to have Luka Doncic for any of that. So they built this roster knowing that both Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving missed time. They came into the season with 6 guards, and that's not even factoring in the kind of playmaking that they've seen from Najee Marshall at Marshall's best this season. They're going to need to rely now on every ounce of that depth to deal with Luka's absence.
Well, look, we've seen the difficulty that this type of injury can have for guys. I mean, remember what happened with Giannis Antetokounmpo last year in the playoffs? Jamal Murray is a guy that, like, it lingered with him. It's so important for a basketball player, like that ability to push off and have confidence to be able to do that without hurting yourself. So a month, that doesn't shock me that they would say, hey, we're going to check back in a month. And you think about what that really means. I mean, when you say something like that, you're like, hey, we're just going to dip our toe in the water in a month and see what's going on. Like, we're not even saying he's back on the court in a month. So question is, I guess, with seemingly this being now a long-term injury for him, who knows really how long it's going to last? What do we do here? Kyrie Irving's just going to dial back the clock like he did, you know, in this game on Christmas, and be the guy that tries to go get you 30 to 40 every night? And what do you think the prospects are of this team continuing to be able to win games and maintain their place in the Western Conference without Luka, when so much of what they have personnel-wise is dependent upon his playmaking?
Kyrie has been at his absolute wizardly best so far this season. I mean, he has been 50, 40, 90 and just fantastic. But you're totally right, Legs. I mean, they can't just now foist it all upon him. They're going to have to approach this they're going to look at this through a long-term lens. And if that means slipping down the West ladder if that means the Mavericks are now not going to have the top 2 or 3 seed they were hoping for, which is something they've never had in the Luka Doncic era, they frankly have to sacrifice all that. I mean, the only thing that matters at this point for this team is to have the healthiest possible Luka and Kyrie come April 15th. I mean, that is the way they have to approach it. So they're going to have to be extra cautious with Luka now, as long as it takes for him to get back on the floor where he doesn't have any recurrences. And if it means that they're going to have to rest Kyrie here in January on occasion and give him some, sneak him a game off here or two, they can't just single-mindedly focus on the standings. I mean, that would be a huge mistake, and I think they know it. And again, I think that's the way this team was built, with so many guards, because they, Kyrie and Luka have always missed a measure of time. Last season, Kyrie Irving played 58 games in his first full season as a Maverick, so he missed 24. Luka has always missed 10 to 15 games. This is going to be more challenging, obviously, now, because Luka's going to miss in the 20s in terms of games this season, which is a first for him. But I really think they can't even worry about standings, seeding, where you land. They got to have these guys as close to full capacity by the spring as they can.
Well, one thing, I'm going to follow up real quick, Adam, I'll let you go, but I just want one thing to follow up on with this. It looks like that's another year that Luka's going to have to suspend being a legitimate MVP candidate. This is going to cost him that, because not only you're missing that much time, and who knows how much it ends up being, it takes him out of the game. Very likely the game limit he's going to have to play. But more importantly, right, I agree with what you said about where they had to finish. I've been waiting for Dallas to finish in the top 3 myself. Like, okay, when that happens, then Luka is going to be the leading candidate for MVP. You have to have the best record in the West, but you can't be 5th or 6th. And this is side note, because who cares about MVP this time of year, I guess. But I picked him to win it before the year. That's going to take him out of it. Now the question remains, how far do they drop? They're 8 games above 500. You got Denver, the Lakers, the Clippers, basically the next 3 teams right behind them. If they win at a similar rate to what they have won to this point, you can't expect Dallas to do that. Where is Dallas by the time Luka comes back, and how much work is that going to be at that time? So this is a serious blow to them, serious blow to the league, really not having him out there.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Another team, though, that's reeling right now that we got to talk about is the Sacramento Kings. They've lost 5 in a row. They're 5 games below 500. Christmas is sort of the mark where in the calendar where you start to say, okay, we have a big enough sample size to read who and what these teams are. And the Kings, to me, look like a team that have lost the rope a little bit. And so I'm curious, Mark, what you think happens with them, because they are behind San Antonio. They're the 12 seed right now in the Western Conference and going the wrong direction. Is this a team that you could see now maybe considering a major shakeup, or have they lost faith in their ability to be one of the teams out West?
Well, look, it's not just a 5-game losing streak. That was a homestand. That was an 0-5 homestand, which is just stunning. And yeah, I mean, look, this, you guys have heard the talk. It's ramped up. This homestand started with the news that De'Aaron Fox's agent, Rich Paul, was meeting with team officials to start talking about the future, because De'Aaron Fox himself, he went on Draymond Green's podcast and openly discussed it. He was eligible for a contract extension. He's resisted it to this point because he wants to be sure that the Kings are going to be competitive. And I mean, there were a lot of contenders for this, the way Milwaukee and Philly started. Indiana is still 500. You can look up and down the West and see several teams, we could say, that have fallen short of preseason expectations. But is there a bigger disappointment on the NBA map right now than the Sacramento Kings? I mean, they made a big swing in the offseason to bring in DeMar DeRozan. It clearly has not worked the way they anticipated. The one thing the Kings were supposed to be, when you add a great closer like Fox offensively to what DeMar DeRozan has done as a fourth quarter player the last couple seasons in Chicago, we thought the Kings were going to be a good crunch time team. It has been disastrous for them late in games. So look, even before this slide, there was all the talk that what can the Kings get on the trade market if they try to package Kevin Huerter and Trey Lyles, but it's gone beyond that. I mean, you hear the talk now that is De'Aaron Fox going to stay there? Are the Kings going to be forced into considering De'Aaron Fox trade scenarios? And Mike Brown, I mean, this thrust him, he's facing all kinds of pressure. If you remember last summer, Mike Brown did get a contract extension, but it wasn't instantaneous. There was a breakdown in talks before they got back to the table, hashed out a contract extension, but they are falling so far short of expectations. I think everyone around the league. I was just at the G League showcase in Orlando with front office people from all 30 teams, and the Kings were a frequent topic. The whole league is watching to see how they're going to respond to this and how drastic it's going to be.
Yeah, real quick, one thing to contrast them too with what your point about teams like Philly and Indiana. Like Philly, obviously decimated by injuries, they're getting their act together. Indiana just won 5 straight games, and they lost to OKC last night in a tough game, but they've won 6 out of 8. So like you can starting to see, okay, rough start out of the gate, went to the conference finals a year ago. What's going on? All kinds of questions in Indiana, and now they're starting to play better. For the Kings, what just happened is rock bottom. Like they're going the wrong direction. And what a brutal way to lose a game. You're giving up a 4-point play when you're up 3, 3 seconds to go in the game. You can't find a worse way to lose a game. So yeah, things are rough there. I thought DeRozan potentially could really help them with a certain element to their offense they didn't have. But, and look, statistically, all 3 of their top guys, Mark, have played pretty well. If you looked at their numbers, each of those guys individually, Fox, Sabonis, and DeRozan, you go, well, it's not his fault. Like he's doing his thing because they're all playing pretty efficiently and pretty well. It's just not working for them.
Yeah. It's, again, the whole league is talking about it. And, do they really, unless they do something, I mean, it's hard for me to see them doing something really drastic in season. I mean,
Agreed.
if there really is going to be something with Fox, you would anticipate that to be an off-season conversation. But that's saying in the short term, do they have the trade assets to make an impactful move? Because they've got to change something for sure. I mean, 0-5 on a homestand is unspeakably bad.
Well, as you mentioned, the trade pieces are small guys, and this team doesn't look like they're a small move away. You never know, but they don't look like they're a small move away. And you said something interesting that this 5-game home losing streak coincides with the news about De'Aaron Fox maybe wanting to go somewhere else. That creates a distraction. Well, over in Miami, or along that same timeline, there's been Jimmy Butler rumors that they might be shipping him out. And here are the teams that they're interested in and so on and so forth. Or Jimmy Butler's interested. But over the week, Pat Riley came out and says, we usually don't comment on rumors, but all this speculation has become a distraction to the team. It's not fair to the players and the coaches. Therefore, we will make it clear we are not trading Jimmy Butler. Pat Riley is the greatest at this, just making a hard line and saying we are not crossing it. But we also know it's the NBA. That's what you say when you're trying to make things go away publicly. So what is this? Do you buy him at face value that this is the hard line in the sand? We don't want to deal with this. We'd rather lose him for nothing than deal with this distraction any longer.
Yeah, I believe it because it is Pat Riley and this is vintage Pat Riley. But also if you look at the landscape, I mean, here, the way that the Heat have been looking at this from the start is the only team out there that's projected to have salary cap space that could sign Jimmy Butler away in the summer is Brooklyn, the rebuild Brooklyn Nets. And so the Heat have been quietly confident that Brooklyn is not creating all this cap space to go after Jimmy Butler, who, as good as Jimmy Butler remains, and I want Jimmy Butler on my team. I mean, he is a winner and a proven playoff performer, but he just turned 35 in September. I don't think the Nets are looking to create this cap space to bring in a 30-something player. That's just not the move you would expect Brooklyn to make. Now, Jimmy Butler would have to decline a $52 million player option to become a free agent. And all the signals have been that is his plan and that is what he wants to do. But if you go back and remember, when the Heat acquired Jimmy Butler, they had no cap space and they still found a way to sign and trade for Jimmy Butler with Philadelphia. So the Heat, they're confident that even if Jimmy Butler is leaving them in the offseason, that they're going to do better in a sign and trade in late June, early July than they would by trading him now. So I think the Heat are serious that they just want to get through this season, see where they land, and they'll deal with Jimmy Butler's future in the summertime. Because, look, the phone could always ring tomorrow and someone gives them an offer that they weren't anticipating. But there's been so much Phoenix talk, and this has been painted as if Bradley Beal just waives his no trade clause, this deal can happen. The Miami Heat aren't interested in Bradley Beal. They don't want to trade Jimmy Butler for Bradley Beal. So it's not that easy. The Suns also have the best the Suns can offer for Jimmy Butler is 1 first-round pick and Bradley Beal. That's all Phoenix has to offer. Miami would rather wait, take this into the summer, and see what happens then. So I actually do think that it would be very hard to imagine the Heat reversing course after such a strong public statement from Pat Riley.
Are you buying it, Legs? Are you buying Pat Riley's line in the stand, or do you feel like this is a little smoke and mirrors?
I just think that in the NBA, there's no such thing as a hard line because it only takes somebody to change your mind,
That's true.
or a guy to do something over a period of a couple of games on your own team to change your mind again. I think he probably meant it when he said it, but that doesn't mean that that's something that's cemented. I think that it's always flexible in the NBA.
The reason I'm buying it is that I've been thinking about this new CBA a lot. I think in the before times, having good contracts was a key. Having good players, that was the key. I think in the new one, you can't have any bad contracts. So it's not a thing of like, oh, well, we'll take Bradley Beal because this or that. You're still stuck with a bad contract. And if that's not the player you want, it doesn't matter. They would rather lose the money, have him walk. And by the way, call his bluff on $50+ million to walk away from that. I mean, he might not have the options that he likes after that as well. So it's better to lose a player. I don't think this has ever been true, but it might be better to lose a player than it is to bring in a bad contract because bad contracts sink you in today's NBA. That's my belief, at least. Mark, good stuff. Covered 3 different teams here on this one. You could catch him at DLLS Mavs post-game show. Should be very interesting over the next month as they try to stay afloat. And, of course, the great Substack. You can follow them at the Stein Line. Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Sounds good, guys. Talk soon.
We'll talk soon. All right, to round out the show, we do as we always do on Friday. We take a look ahead at the weekend. This segment is presented by FanDuel. You guys know FanDuel. You can get in on the action right now. 150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/AllNBA. Friday slate, Knicks at Magic, Pacers at Celtics, Wolves at Rockets. I like that one. Wolves are hanging by a thread. Cavs at Nuggets. Worried about that one. My Nuggets at home against the Cavs. Mavs at Suns. Warriors at Clippers. Which one catches your eye for tonight, Legs?
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this is one of the best single night scheduling wise in the league this year. Look at these games, man. You know, and I know the Magic are missing some key guys. That's still going to be a good game. They're still competitive. They play really hard. And the Knicks are entertaining. Pacers, Celtics, man. The Pacers now playing well, going into Boston, who's struggling a little bit. That should be a very entertaining game. Could be 100 threes taken in that game. Wemby's playing tonight. Minnesota, Houston, man, that's a really top-notch game right now, even though Minnesota's not where they want to be. Ja Morant's playing tonight. Cavs at the Nuggets, that's a big-time game. Dallas at Phoenix, you lose some luster, obviously, without Luka. Still 2 good teams. And then Warriors, Clippers. I mean, this is a really solid slate for a Friday night right after Christmas, man. So I don't even know where to begin. I'm probably going to start with the Pacers Celtics, though.
Well, there you go. Let's look at Saturday again. Pull it up again here for us, James. Let's take a look at the Saturday one because there were some good Saturday games as well. We got Heat at Hawks, Suns at Warriors. That's always a good one when you get those two, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry playing against each other. And then I don't know if you saw it last week, Kings at Lakers twice. Let's do it a third time, Legs. Why not? Third time in like 6 days or 7 days that those teams will match up. That's why I put it on the list.
Well, the Kings lost to them twice in a row at home. Now let's see, they got to go on the road and try to beat them. That ought to be interesting.
I know that ought to be interesting. And then again,
by the way, Durant Curry Saturday night. I mean, you got to take in as many of those as you can. You don't know how many more times you're going to see Steph Curry, Kevin Durant. Like, so if they're playing against each other, you got to watch it.
And then on the Sunday slate, Indiana, Boston again. Another one of these 2 games in a row. Same city, same teams. You've also got Miami and Houston, which should be good. But the game for me, and the one we're probably going to be talking about next week, Memphis at Oklahoma City. That should be a really good test for the Grizzlies going into the Thunder. The Grizzlies have some huge wins, man. This would be a signature win for them if they were to get it.
And you're talking about Ja Morant and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, man. That's high entertainment. More than any position in this league, I swear, these point guards that are scoring point guards, when they get a chance to go head to head, it seems like they're more determined to make a statement than any other position in the league. So that's a good one. Have they played, by the way? I'm looking at, they played yet this year?
I don't know if they have.
That would have jumped out to me. I'm looking up there. No, this is their first time they have played, will be Sunday. So that's why I would have noticed that matchup at some point this year. It hasn't happened. That's why we haven't seen it. So Ja Morant and SGA, man, head to head on Sunday. That's big time.
That's going to be real big time. All right, let's get to our super chats. What do we have? Cedric Exquisite says, no, Adam, no legs. 76ers aren't up. Wait till the playoffs. Okay, there you go. Well, we'll wait till the playoffs then.
That's kind of what I said was I don't care if Embiid played every game between now and then, I'd still be skeptical, but you can't deny that this team's playing a lot better right now. And they have the talent to continue to move up in the Eastern Conference. They will do that.
Nico says there have been trade rumors about Cam Johnson going to Oklahoma City. Do you think he fits in at the 4 spot and J-Dub can finally play the 3?
I'd love to see Cam Johnson in Oklahoma City. I think they need to get a little bit more consistent with their shooters, built around those guys. And he's got a beautiful stroke, man. So I think that would be a nice addition if that were to happen.
Yeah, come on. OKC has enough. Don't send them more talent. Psycho Blue says B-Ball Cthulhu thinks if Pat Riley didn't want these rumors to be a distraction, they should have been stamped out long before it got to this point. Players talk, and this can take away Miami's status as a destination. I don't know about that. I think Miami's still a destination. Pat Riley's always operated this way. He operated this way with Dwayne Wade. Remember, they had a little contract dispute. He operated this way with LeBron James. And you know what? People still want to go to Miami. It's Miami.
Well, the only thing I'll say about that is there was a time when every single free agent that was like the top tier guys, every single offseason, Miami was on the short list of teams for those guys. And I don't feel like it's that way to that extent right now. And every year there's like 3 or 4 guys that we're talking about our main focus. And it hasn't seemed as prevalent that they're in that conversation to get those types of players. So I'm not saying it's off the map now. Nobody wants to go. I'm not saying that, but it was a time it felt like everybody was rumored to be going there as if that was their first choice. And right now, look, Heat are what they are. They're a 500 team. That's what Miami is right now.
Yeah. All right, and we have one last one. Super Dope Hip Hop says, fire Christmas Day games. Was that Pacers OKC game last night? SGA, as of today, MVP in my opinion. OKC 68 win pace. SGA plays all of the games. Number 1 win shares plus minus and net plus minus. With Luka falling out of the race, I think SGA is going to have. It's really, if we're looking at it, Giannis, SGA, Jokic, the remaining candidates. We'll see if Denver can climb in the standings well enough. It might become a 2-man race before we know it.
I agree. SGA's in the front. He's the front runner now. And look, it's early. Like if you grab a hold of the front runner spot by like mid-March, you're not getting run down from behind. That's typically the way this league works, man. Unless you get hurt at that point or your team falls off the shelf, which usually doesn't happen. So to have the front runner spot Christmas, January 1st, that's great. But it's by the time you get to that stretch mid-March, you've played a month out of the All-Star game or several weeks out of the All-Star game. That's when you want to grab it and get the momentum. But I agree, as we sit here right now, it's him because of their team success, how great he has been. They were number 1 in the West a year ago. They're 24-5 this year, man. That team is really, really good. And when you look at the other top teams right now, Adam, in the league, I don't think anybody from Boston's going to get it. I don't think anybody from Cleveland's going to get it. I don't think Ja Morant's going to get it. Luka's now, that really hurt him. I think took him out of it. Jokic is certainly statistically in it, as is Giannis. Those would be 2 guys. But look at Denver. They're 8 games back. Like you're not going to – if you end up 12, 15 games back at OKC, you're not winning the MVP. So I don't believe so. And Giannis, he's absolutely in the mix. I would probably say SGA 1 right now, Giannis 2 would be the way it would get voted.
I think so too. I think that's how it's going to shake out. And we have one more. Is that right? Cycle Blue comes back. He says, friendly reminder, the last 3 teams to beat Phoenix on Christmas won the West. But now what's going to happen now that Phoenix won on Christmas? Is this their year? Probably not. But those fun with numbers. Why not? Why not have some fun with statistical anomalies? All right, that does it. And we appreciate you guys tuning in. We're back next week. We'll have some great shows. If you like the show today, make sure you're subscribed. We have great content coming on every single day, from shorts to other videos, as well as our live show, which we do 4 times a week. Do us a favor. Also, download us on your podcast app. So if you're in the car, these smartphones and the cars today, you can just hit the Spotify button, talk to your car, say, play All NBA podcast. They'll play it for you. So make sure that you have us downloaded on your phone or the podcast app, subscribed on YouTube, and following us on all social media channels. Thanks, everybody, for watching today. Hit that like button. We'll see you next week.
All silly like the mayor.